Welcome back to Carneades.org. Today we're going to be continuing with our series, What is Theocracy? In this video we're going to be taking a look at what is Hindutva. Now, Hindutva directly translates to Hinduness, or the quality of being Hindu. However, this term has been co-opted by politicians and political parties in India to describe a particular variety of Hindu nationalism. In some ways, it is used as a dog whistle for Hindu nationalists, where politicians that identify it with can claim that they're only supporting the literal translation of being Hindu, when in fact they're most often referencing a more exclusionary tradition associated with V.D. Savarkar and his book Hindutva, who is a Hindu. So you will see people that protest and say, Hindutva's nothing, it's just being a Hindu, where often what's going on, at least when politicians are using it, is to try to cover up a more nationalist and, to a certain degree, theocratic ideology. Let's take a look. So, before delving into Hindutva, it's important to understand what Hinduism is, as this is, to a certain degree, a point of contention for advocates of Hindutva. The term Hinduism is generally used to be much broader than more exclusive or strictly defined religious terms like Islam or Christianity. Initially, Hinduism was a term used by those in the West to describe many of the different cultural and religious traditions in the Indus River Valley and South Asia. Often it's described in terms of what it's not. Specifically, it can refer to any of the religious traditions in the South and Southeast Asia that were not founded elsewhere, i.e. Christianity, Islam, etc., and that have not coalesced into an independent tradition distinct from Hinduism, such as Jainism, Sikhism, Buddhism, though some Hindus have identified these as Hindu traditions. Practitioners of those specific religions often don't self-identify that way, and so usually they're excluded from a broad definition of Hinduism. Many Hindus affirm Hinduism as an inclusive religion, accepting an infinite variety of gods, practices, texts, and communities, including atheistic traditions and theistic traditions alike, as part of this broad, inclusive, overarching idea of what it is to be a Hindu. Now, this traditionally broad and inclusive conception of Hinduism is challenged by followers of the political position of Hindutva, as coined by V.D. Savarkar, who argued for a more clearly defined and therefore exclusionary Hinduness, which defined Hindus based on geographic and racial considerations. Often this movement is framed in explicit opposition to Islam and secularism in India. Proponents of this movement advocate for India to be an explicitly Hindu state, arguing that this is required to push back against other religions that are less pluralistic than Hinduism, that are exclusionary, that would force their ways on people of India and protect the rights of Hindus in India. It's worthy of note that Savarkar was an atheist himself, though Hindutva is both focused on excluding particular religious groups, especially Islam, to preserve Hindu culture, and pushing a particular Hindu dogma as law. Advocates of this viewpoint have engaged in practical, direct discrimination against non-Hindus, such as making it harder for Muslims to gain citizenship, while making it easier for many other small religious groups that might broadly be classified under Hinduism to gain citizenship, or more dogmatic proselytization by controlling the narrative, such as changing school textbooks to quote-unquote saffronize history by injecting Hindu nationalism into curriculum, or by arresting comedians that are critical of Hinduism. Some of the strongest advocates of Hindutva are India's current ruling party, the BJP, and their leader, Narendra Modi. The BJP is closely aligned with the RSS, a paramilitary Hindu nationalist organization. These organizations opposed the vision of religious freedom and a secular India from the beginning. Gandhi's assassin was a member of the RSS, and V.D. Savarkar stood trial for his involvement with that assassination. While he was never found guilty, a government commission did later find out that he was involved in Gandhi's murder. The BJP has enacted a range of policies targeting Muslim minorities, from excluding Muslim immigrants from access to citizenship in an apparent attempt to declare any Muslim citizens not registered with the government as illegal immigrants, to destroying Muslim-owned homes, and even inciting a mob to destroy an ancient mosque. Hindutva is largely a variety of communitarian nationalism. It's not as much a theocracy as some of the other positions like Islamism that we've looked at. It focuses more on the racial and geographic differences than dogmatic religious ones. But if anything, it's almost an inverse theocracy, focused on excluding Islam as opposed to promoting or supporting a specific Hindu dogma. So it's not even as much solely about geographic or racial differences. It's more about keeping off a different religion. The BJP's controversial citizenship law admitted a range of other non-Hindu religions, but explicitly excluded Muslims. This is perhaps a feature of the broad and inclusive nature of Hinduism itself that would make it challenging to institute a formal theocracy, as the clergy and even beliefs are so diffuse. We've talked about before in this series how diffuse many beliefs and clergy are in certain religions. Hinduism is the far extreme of that. And so it would be very challenging to even try to, in theory, impose a certain set of beliefs on people. That said, there are some clear components of theocracy there, with the explicit attempts to remove secularism from the Constitution and identify India as an explicitly Hindu state. Now, there are a range of objections to Hindutva that could be offered to any theocratic viewpoint, arguing that the only way to ensure such a nationalist state is the oppression of religious minorities, as we are seeing in modern India today, particularly with Islam, or making the case from the standpoint of classical liberalism that people should be free to worship as they wish, etc. But these arguments have been gone over in other videos in this series. Instead, we're going to look at arguments that were originally offered in the case of India in defense of a secular and multicultural India. So, the key figure in these debates is, of course, Mahatma Gandhi. Beyond his crucial role in the liberation of India from British colonial rule, Gandhi argued against the partition of India, making the case instead for a single, secular state based on tolerance of all traditions, including Islam. Gandhi defended such a view in reference to the inclusivist tenets of Hinduism, that all religions were seeking the same truth. In some ways, this is a bit of the paradox posed by Hindutva. A key element of Hinduism for many is the inclusion of diverse faiths and methods for seeking divine truth. However, Hinduism is often faced with religious traditions, such as Islam, which do not accept such a pluralist viewpoint, arguing that there's only one true religion. The practitioners of Hindutva say that in the face of such opponents, Hindus should rise up and more clearly define their identity in opposition to these other viewpoints, lest they be subsumed by religions with more strict tenets. Other Hindus, such as Gandhi, argued that doing so would be an abrogation of the central tenet of inclusivity in Hinduism. This has analogues in the paradox of tolerance, the question of whether a tolerant society should allow for intolerant ideologies. If they allow them, then they are allowing intolerance in a society that values tolerance, but if they do not, they are themselves being intolerant. And so there's this question of, if Hinduism wants to be a tolerant and inclusive religion, should they allow in intolerant ideas and religions, such as Islam, into that sphere of tolerance? Some advocates of Hindutva see themselves as making such a choice in the face of religions that are not as inclusive or pluralistic, choosing to be intolerant, but only of those that are intolerant themselves, for the sake of preserving tolerance, which can explain the targeting of Muslims specifically instead of other religions that are more closely related to Hinduism. What do you think? How should a tolerant and inclusive religion respond to an exclusive one? Is a secular state sufficient to ensure the rights both of majority and minority communities? Is the BJP instituting theocratic laws, or are these laws more just communitarian nationalist, or are they neither? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Watch this video and more here at Carneades.org, and stay skeptical, everybody.